Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Thank you for joining me this evening as we kick off our first presentation of a series of presentations that have to do with getting ourselves prepared for the month of Ramadan. Today's topic is going to be fasting the physician within. So without further ado, inshallah, we will get started with that. I always take the liberty to prepare all of my notes and present it to you in the form of a PowerPoint. And today is no exception to that. Let's see. So we have Sister Hafsa Adil Samad. Wa alaikum salam to you and your family. Thank you for responding. Inshallah, you and your family and everyone who's watching and their families are doing well. So today's topic is fasting the physician within. This is the first presentation in a series of presentations to do with the prep for Ramadan. Now, Ramadan is less than 2 months away. Today being the as you see right there, the 12th of Rajab. So we are officially, close to not even about a month and a half away from Ramadan. And before we get into anything significant, whenever we plan for something major or significant, there's certain prep and plan that we do in order to get ourselves ready for that. And the month of Ramadan should be no exception to that. By the way, this presentation today is part one, as I mentioned, of a series. There are other presentations that I'm going to be making. One of them is going to be the purification within, the tazkiyah aspect of the month of Ramadan. What are the internal mechanics, things that are beyond the fiqh and beyond the outer element of fasting? One of the presentations is going to be the tarbiyah within. This is the theme that I'm going with for all of my prep topics within. So we have the physician within, the tazkiyah within, the tarbiyah within. The tarbiyah within is going to be a presentation that has to do with the building of habits and discipline. We also have one presentation talking about the history of fasting in Islam. Now, what was fasting before fasting in Ramadan came around? We're going to talk about that history. Fasting, the tiers within. We know fasting is not just about the hunger. It's about the fasting of not just the digestive system, but the fasting of every organ in our body. So that's one presentation dedicated towards that. Today, we're going to talk about the physician within. What are we going to talk about today? Just to kind of set up the stage for you, we're going to start off talking about what is fasting, the definition of fasting, the history of fasting, the benefits of fasting, fasting and cognitive strength, the difference between fasting and starvation, what happens when we eat, and what happens when we fast, okay? There is a little bit of a disclaimer that I need to share with you after one slide, so stay tuned for that. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. What is fasting? Yes, we know what fasting is. Yes, Imam Saab, we know what fasting is. But just as a refresher, I want to share with you so as I mentioned, for those of you who read the details of this topic in the description, that I'm not going to be talking about fasting as an act of worship. I'm going to be talking about fasting as an action, okay? Staying hungry. And for that, I want to set up the stage by introducing to you what the technical and Islamic definition of fasting is. So fasting in Arabic, first of all, is called Saum. It is also called Siyam. These are two words that are used in Urdu known as Roza, okay? But otherwise in Arabic known as Saum or Siyam. Now, if you open the dictionary of the root words and meanings, the meaning of words in Arabic, the word Saum means to stay away from something. It means to distance yourself, avoid, and hold back from something. When we talk about it in the technical sense, what is the definition, the technical definition in the books of fiqh of fasting? Well, it means to intentionally abstain from all and any kind of eating, drinking, and sexual intercourse from dawn to sunset. Okay, so there is the aspect of intentional abstinence. There is the aspect of eating, drinking, and sexual intercourse. There is the time frame of fasting, which is from dawn to sunset. And who must fast? Obligated upon who is required to fast, meaning someone who has reached the age of puberty. You got to be Muslim for in order for fasting to be obligatory on you. You must be sane and physically able and capable. Those aspects of fasting, inshallah, we're going to talk about in the presentation that's going to be titled "The Fiqh Within Fasting." Now, a disclaimer that I wanted to share with you, folks, and let me just minimize this. So, as a Muslim, as a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, myself and you all, we believe and understand and accept that all of the instructions and commandments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in regards to things to do and in regards to things to stay away from. It is my belief and understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in everything that He has instructed me to do in my faith, in every aspect of my existence, is for my well-being. It is with my best interest at hand. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who created us, and He knows what is good for us and He knows what is bad for us. The things that are good for us, He has instructed us to do. Whatever level the instruction is at, it could be at the level of obligation or something that is discretionary, something that is optional, whatever it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to do. It is my belief, it is your belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a benefit for us in that instruction. There is no doubt about that. Okay? This presentation that I'm sharing with you, and I don't need, by the way, as a Muslim, I don't need to be convinced through any scientific research, through any debate and argument that, you know what, praying 5 times a day or fasting or going for Hajj or whatever it is that my religion tells me to adhere to and do, I don't need to be convinced by any argument to understand that it is only for my good and my well-being. However, with that being said, in everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with that being said, it does not hurt for us to delve into the reality and try to uncover and understand what the health benefits of, what are the tangible benefits of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated or instructed to us to do on a discretionary level, fard, nafil, sunnah, all of these things. It only helps us increase our iman. And what I'm going to present to you today, okay, is only for us to gain information and an appreciation of the act of fasting. This is in no way or means trying to make a case that, hey, you know what, fasting is good for us. No. That case does not need to be made because Allah has ordered us to fast in the month of Ramadan. So it has to be good for us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. And we're going to cross that bridge and talk about that ayah when we discuss the ayat that pertain to the laws that pivot around fasting in the month of Ramadan. So please do not take me wrong. Today, what I'm going to be sharing with you is going to be a departure from the act of fasting as worship. I am not talking about fasting in the month of Ramadan. I'm not talking about fasting in a spiritual sense today. I'm not talking about fasting in an obligatory sense today. I am talking about the choice for one to remain hunger and not eat for a long period of time, which is called fasting. So I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. I have been advised by my friends at the law offices of relax and calm down. I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to give you a presentation in which, hey, you know what, we should fast because it's good for us, there's all these health benefits. No, we must fast in the month of Ramadan if we fall in that category. So please, just throwing this disclaimer out there, you're more than welcome to add comments in the comment section for if you have benefited from, if you feel like you will benefit or you have benefited from this presentation that I'm sharing with you, please share it with your friends. I have put a lot of work and research into what I'm going to share with you, and I'm also going to share with you a few of the books that I used. And take this from your brother who has after reading about the benefits of fasting. Anyways, I'm going to share that with you at the end of the presentation, my personal experience with intermittent fasting. That's also one of the things that I'm going to talk about. I won't be able to cover it tonight. I know I'm not going to be able to cover it tonight, but we're going to talk about IF, aka intermittent fasting, the 5-2 diet, all of these variations of fasting. Okay, again, we are not talking about fasting as an act of worship in Ramadan. I'm not talking about the optional discretionary fasting of Mondays and Thursdays observed by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No, we are talking about fasting in the contemporary medical sense of the word fasting and understanding of fasting. So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. By the way, FYI, if you did not know, fasting is one of the most ancient and widespread healing traditions in the world. Now, Hippocrates, someone who is known widely as being the father of modern medicine, okay? Again, remember, we are going to tackle and understand the aspect and concept of fasting from strictly a contemporary vision and a contemporary view of it. He prescribed and championed the practice of fasting and the consumption of apple cider vinegar. Just as a side note, Hippocrates wrote, "To eat when you are sick is to feed your illness." There's also mention of the ancient Greek writer and historian Plutarch. He also echoed these sentiments. He wrote, "Instead of using medicine, better fast today." So ancient Greek thinkers such as Plato and his student Aristotle, they were also staunch supporters of fasting. We hear the ayah of Ramadan, "Oh, you who believe, fasting has been prescribed for you as it has been prescribed for those before you." We hear this, we read this, we are told that, in every ummah there was a variation of fasting, okay? Not just every ummah as a part of their act of worship, but in general, historically speaking, fasting is something that was observed across cultures, across religions, across different types of faiths and beliefs. And I'm also going to share that with you, not tonight, but the different variations of fasting, the different definitions of fasting, amongst other faith-based and non-faith-based practices. Okay. Now, fasting for thousands of years was used widespread as a form of therapy, as a form of healing in the world of medicine. Many of the great doctors of ancient times and many of the oldest healing systems have recommended fasting as an integral method of healing and prevention. Okay, Ayurvedic medicine has long advocated fasting as a major treatment. In ancient Greece, Pythagoras was among many who extolled its virtues. During the 14th century, fasting was practiced by Saint Catherine of Siena, while the Renaissance doctor Paracelsus called it the physician within. And when I came across, so this phrase, the physician within, is attributed, I read it attributed to Thomas Jefferson in one spot and to this person in another source. And this is where I'll be very honest and straight up with you. The theme of all of my lectures, the physician within, the tazkiyah within, the tarbiyah within, the tears within, the fiqh within, the mechanics within, all of these are based on this inspiration of the quote, the physician within. Fasting is the physician within our bodies. Okay. Now, As I mentioned, I quoted Hippocrates, is widely considered the father of Western medicine. He prescribed fasting and the consumption of apple cider vinegar, which, by the way, alhamdulillah, that's something that I have included as a part of my daily ritual for a while now. He believed that fasting enabled the body to heal itself. And he wrote, to eat when you are sick is to feed your illness. Now, you know, these quotes that I'm sharing with you, I'm going to expand on this, inshallah, as I get further in this presentation. The ancient Greek writer and historian Plutarch wrote, instead of using medicine, better fast today. So what was his case? Instead of waiting to get sick and then resorting to the use of medicine, just fast. Make fasting a part of your regular ritual and regimen, and you will avoid having to use medication altogether. Okay. Philip Paracelsus, the founder of toxicology and one of the three fathers of modern Western medicine, wrote 500 years ago that fasting is the greatest remedy, the physician within. Benjamin Franklin, one of America's founding fathers and renowned for wide knowledge in many areas, once wrote of fasting, the best of all medicines is resting and fasting. Okay? Again, for those of you who are watching, the case and presentation that I'm going to present to you does not take away from the fact that as a Muslim, we understand, know, and accept that whatever Allah has asked us to do, commanded us to do, urged us and encouraged us to do, definitely, blindfoldedly, without a doubt, is for our benefit and in our best interest. Okay, so the instinct of fasting. Okay, fasting is an instinct. What is an instinct? An instinct is something that is embedded within you naturally. Okay, fasting is an instinct that makes animals and humans lose their appetite when sick. Okay, now this is a very important point. You know, do you remember the last time you got very ill? Okay, if you got sick with the flu, what's the last thing that you want to do? The last thing you want to do when you're feeling sick or when you're dealing with the flu is to eat. You just don't feel like eating, okay? Why don't you feel like eating? Because it is an instinct within our body, okay? Fasting is ingrained into the human heritage and system that even our body doesn't feel like eating when we are sick. So this tells you that there is something beneficial and something that is of benefit to our body when we are sick. There is a cure in fasting. There is a cure in hunger. You've probably heard the old proverb, feed a cold and starve a fever. Okay. Now, while experts say neither dieting nor force feeding yourself is likely to help you recuperate any faster, you may certainly find yourself straying from your regular eating habits when you're under the weather. In fact, loss of appetite is a well-documented symptom of a number of illnesses. When we are sick, our bodies mount a complex inflammatory response, partly responsible for decreased appetite. Okay, so again, going back to the point where, when we are ill, our body responds by losing its appetite. And that tells you something about the benefit and the eagerness of a body to be hungry. Okay, now we're talking about the benefits of fasting. Okay, so one of the things that I'm going to share with you is fasting promotes healing and recovery. Now, I have these slides for you. If you feel like you want to go back to it, you can press pause and read and understand the slides. But as far as promoting healing and recovery, our lowered drive to eat may actually free up some energy to mount that immune response. Okay, so when we stop eating, our body is not using the energy it has to process the food that's going in. So what happens with that energy? It gets freed up to start that immune response. Digesting food also takes energy. So if we're not digesting food, it frees up energy to help fight an infection or illness. Loss of appetite may also discourage viruses from growing more, okay? Eating less may decrease certain substances that viruses feed on. Same goes for bacteria, which won't find as much glucose and iron in the blood to feed on if you're eating less. This complex response is adaptive short term and can promote recovery and healing. So there you go, folks. There are many viruses and bacteria that actually feed and grow off the food that we consume. So when you stop the food, what happens? It stops feeding the bacteria and the virus that is causing our illness. Okay. Now we're going to talk about, so this was talking about healing and recovery. Okay. What about fasting and cognitive strength? Okay. The ancient Greeks believed that fasting improves cognitive abilities. Both the brain and body actually perform better during fasting. In the case of the brain, cognitive function, learning, memory, and alertness are all increased by fasting. Okay, Dr. Jason Fung, who is the author of this book and I'll go ahead and show you. This book right here is called The Complete Guide to Fasting. Okay, and I kind of tripped over this book by mistake, and I started reading, and I was like, you know what? This makes so much sense. Subhanallah, gaining an appreciation and a better understanding of what my Lord has asked me and obligated me to do for my own best interest. Okay, so he explains why it made sense that fasting should enhance our cognition. Okay, our ancestors were adapted to an environment of scarce food. If you think about it, we walk into a grocery store and we buy what we want when we want during business hours, and with the variety of things that are available to us. But our ancestors did not have this luxury. If conditions of starvation decreased problem-solving ability and memory, they would tend to lead to death. Imagine if being hungry made you slowed your thinking process down. Then how would they survive? There is a saying in English, necessity is the mother of invention. Okay? Necessity is the mother of invention. If our ancestors, if hunger would have hindered their capacity to think of how to survive, then they wouldn't have survived. So in other words, when we are hungry, we need to be smarter. We need to recognize patterns better, and we need better memory to recall information to help out where the food is. We need the drive to push us out into the world to find sustenance. And that makes so much sense, folks. Okay, so I talked about healing and recovery. We talked about cognitive strength, and we're going to get back to the cognitive aspect in a few more slides with some examples. Okay, fasting and cellular repair. Okay, autophagy, which means to self-eat. Okay, this is a phrase, and you're going to learn what this process is. The literal meaning of this is self-eating, or to consume one's self. So when we fast, folks, it triggers a process of autophagy, which is the body's way of cleaning out damaged cells in order to regenerate newer, healthier cells. Now, this is a self-preservation mechanism through which the body removes dysfunctional cells and recycles parts of them towards cellular repair and cleaning. The purpose of this process is to remove debris and self-regulate back to optimal smooth function. So when we fast and when we stay hungry, folks, it triggers a process of recycling, of cleaning at the same time. It's like pressing the reset button for your body. Plus, it promotes survival and adaptation as a response to various stressors and toxins accumulated in our cells. Okay? When a person eats after fasting, the neurons shift into growth mode. These cycles of metabolic challenge may optimize neuroplasticity, learning, memory, and the resistance of the brain to stress. Okay, so fasting is not only good for our sharpness and memory, but it also allows a process in our body to start that resets and recycles cells in our body. Okay, now this process that I mentioned in the last slide, I just want to summarize this for for us to understand better. The process when your body undergoes a big clear out and a proper cleanup. Okay, this not only makes your cells more efficient, it also prolongs the life of your cells, and with that, your own. Okay. Now, I'm not here to say that, you are going to get a longer life. We die whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes for us to die. Okay. When our time is up, that's when we go. But one thing that definitely could be said is, the action of fasting, the act of fasting, it definitely prolongs the quality of life, if you will, through the recycling and the process of cellular repair throughout our body. Okay. Going back to cognitive strength. Okay. Fasting as well as exercise stimulates the production of a protein in nerve cells called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. This protein plays critical roles in learning, memory, and generation of new nerve cells. Okay, it also makes neurons more resistant to stress. Norepinephrine. When we fast, the levels of this increase, which enhances mental focus and increases memory storage and the retrieval in the brain. Okay, now this is an example that was shared in this book that I am reading. There is a book called Unbroken, which is a memoir of American soldiers condemned to starvation conditions in a Japanese prison camp. The author recounts how one prisoner found himself able to recall entire books from memory alone. Another prisoner managed to learn Norwegian in a single week. Interestingly, the author mentions that aside from this, that such feats of mental enhancement were well known as side effects of starvation. So, there are observations and research that prove and explain to us that when you put your body through periods of hunger, it is actually good for your focus and it is good for your brain. Now, I have a little meme over here. Okay, we all know what a food coma is. Especially when we, chow down immediately after iftar. And we're going to talk about that. By the way, one of my presentations is going to be, I know I don't seem like the best candidate to talk about healthy eating and healthy living, but I promise you, I have made a lot of changes in my diet, and I am continuing to make more and more changes in my diet without giving away too much. But yeah. Think about the last time you ate a huge meal. Did you feel more energetic? Did you feel more mentally alert and sharp? Or did you feel really groggy or sleepy and just sit around and lay out on the couch? Okay. Most probably you became very lazy. Okay. Why? Because blood is shunted to your digestive system to cope with the huge influx of food, leaving less blood going to the brain. Okay. What happens as a result of that? A food coma, okay? People call it that because they recognize that eating a lot does not give you more mental capacity. And honestly, folks, it is a huge disservice for our post-iftar worship in the month of Ramadan for us to, and please forgive me for using this phrase, pig out after iftar, after Maghrib, okay? Now, what most people think is that food makes you concentrate better, and if you fast, you can't concentrate. Folks, it is quite the opposite, okay? Eating, the more you eat, the more groggy and less energized that you get. Okay. Now, going back to fasting and cognitive strength, ancient Greek philosophers such as Pythagoras required fasting of their students in order to help them improve mental focus. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? As an imam, I have been posed this question more than a handful of times. That does my son, and by the way, when I say that, I mean like after the post-puberty, okay? Adult child, do they have to fast? They have a test this Ramadan. They have the MCAT. They have something or the other going on, and fasting, will hinder their ability to do good on that test. Well, guess what? as the example over here, he required his students to fast in order to help them improve mental focus. Medieval monks and other scholars combined frequent fasting with lifestyles of astonishing intellectual output. This is not just from, a Greek background or the background of medieval monks, but even in the world of Islamic scholarship. Okay, when we hear about the great giants of scholarship and authors, what was a part of their regimen? They were known to be people who fasted, their whole lives regularly. Okay, so yeah, so this, this understanding that, oh, you know what, staying hungry is gonna make me lose focus. No, actually, hunger and fasting increases your cognitive capacity and it helps you improve in your mental focus. Okay, now I'm going to take a little time, even though I have a whole presentation designated that I'm going to talk about under the ayah كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم. Fasting has been prescribed for you as it was prescribed and ordained for those before you. But right now, I just want to share with you briefly where fasting finds its place in different arenas. Now, in primitive cultures, fast was often demanded before going to war as a part of a coming of age ritual. When we talk about North America, native North Americans used fasting to calm an angry deity, okay, the angry gods, and as a rite to avoid catastrophes such as famine. Fasting has played a key role in all of the world's major religions, apart from Zoroastrianism, by the way. In Zoroastrianism, they do not accept the concept and prohibit the concept of fasting. We'll talk about that, inshallah, in detail at another time. But in other religions, okay, fasting is associated with repentance, with tawbah, other forms of self-control. Judaism has several annual fasting days, and in the month of Muharram, when I was talking about Islamic holidays, I dedicated quite a few slides to talk about the different festivals and holidays in Judaism that have to do with fasting and celebration, etc., etc. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. In Islam, obviously, Muslims fast during the holy month of Ramadan. Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox Church, they observe a 40-day Lent, a 40-day fast during Lent, the period when Christ fasted for 40 days in the desert. We also understand in the Quran that Musa alayhi salam also fasted what? He fasted for 30 days, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed him to add another 10 days. So he fasted 40 days before receiving the gift of the Torah. Okay? And I have spoken about that in previous lectures, and we will also cross that bridge again when we talk about the history of fasting. Now, with all of this being said, why do people fast? There are two reasons. There are two main purposes and objectives to fast. One of them is spiritual, which again, that's not what I'm going to discuss today. I made that disclaimer. And the other objective and purpose of fasting is physical. Now, spiritually speaking, fasting helps us transcend our addiction and attachment to food. Yes, when we fast, one of the things that we hear about in Ramadan is what? That when you stay hungry, it gives you an appreciation for food. It gives you an understanding of what someone goes through in an involuntary fasting, when someone is starving, okay? It helps us realize that, it helps us realize that we do not live by bread alone. Okay, so hunger is something that helps us spiritually. The mind gets clearer and spiritual awareness deepens. Now, you may think that, oh, Ramadan starts, we feel really groggy and it's so hard to focus. And, we feel in the beginning of Ramadan, many people have a really hard time. Why? Because on the first of Ramadan, that is the first time they fasted in the whole year. Okay, or the first time that they have fasted in a while. So, of course, when you put your body under this type of stress, of course it's going to have an effect. But I'm here in this presentation to help make the case for you, for us to appreciate and understand that, fasting is not just for Ramadan, folks. Okay, fasting is not just for Ramadan, but fasting is something that should be a part of our. It should be more regular. Okay, it shouldn't be an annual thing, but it should be. It should be a weekly. I will make that case that it should be a weekly part of our lives. And I I'm going to be very straightforward, folks, that I don't like to preach something that I personally do not practice. So, I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to share with you, probably at the end of this or maybe in the next presentation, my experience with IF, intermittent fasting. So the mind gets clearer, spiritual awareness deepens. We are freed from having to satisfy physical hunger. One can turn one's attention to feeding the mind and spirit. Spiritual masters wouldn't admit any disciple into their higher teachings unless they had first purified themselves through fasting. Again, I'm not talking about Islam. I'm not talking about Muslims. We're talking about, in general, a contemporary Western understanding and experience with the act of fasting. Okay, now that was the spiritual aspect. What about the physical aspect? Physically, fasting enables the organisms to detoxify and clean house. So remember this phrase: fasting. You know what? Let me go ahead and make that bold. Fasting helps us clean house, okay? Because the vast majority of diseases are caused by auto-intoxication. Fasting has wide-ranging therapeutic benefits. It also gives the digestive organs a much-needed rest. For all fevers and diseases in the acute crisis stage, Hippocrates prescribed either a strict fast with nothing but water or medicinal teas or a very slender liquid diet. Fasting is also recommended for colds and flu, arthritis and rheumatism, digestive complaints, and all humoral and metabolic disorders. Scientific experiments conducted on laboratory mice have shown that severe restriction of caloric intake greatly extends their lifespan. Since this is basically what fasting is, fasting holds great promise for life extension. Now, as Muslims, we got to take that with a grain of salt or a spoon of salt, depending on how much you like your sodium, because we understand and accept the fact that we die when Allah wants us to. We live as long as Allah allows us to. But definitely, this is something that could be said that the quality of life is something that we aspire to attain. And by the way, look, this body that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us is an amana, is a trust, just like our families, just like our children, just like everything else. So it is important, very important for us to take care of that. Okay. Now, what is the difference between fasting and starvation? Okay. Fasting, folks, is not starvation. Fasting is not starvation. The difference between fasting and starvation is the aspect of control, okay? Don't confuse fasting and starvation for each other. These terms should never be used interchangeably. Please, when you as a Muslim are explaining to your neighbor Bob or Barbara or Peter or whoever your neighbor is, if you're explaining the concept of fasting to someone who does not understand fasting in the month of Ramadan, do not say that, oh, we starve ourselves. No, we voluntarily hold back, okay? Fasting and starving live on opposite ends of the world. It's the difference between, look, one is, okay, you know what? I want to go for a jog. I want to run. You go outside your house and you sprint all the way out to the end of the block. The difference between that and you running because there's a dog off a leash and it's going after you, yeah, that's the difference between fasting and starvation, okay? Fasting is what? Voluntary abstention from eating. It is deliberate. It is controlled. You have food available, okay? When we fast in the month of Ramadan, we start our fast in the morning with food in the fridge for iftar, okay? But you choose not to eat it. You start your fast and you end your fast whenever you want to. Okay, now we're talking about fasting in general. In Ramadan, you don't have the option to break the fast whenever you want to. We have to go from dawn to Maghrib. But in general, fasting, you start when you want to, you stop when you want to, for whatever reason or for no reason at all. Okay, now what is starving on the other hand? It's not voluntary. You have no idea when and where your next meal is coming from. People do go through starvation. Okay, when do people go through starvation? People go through starvation when either there's famine, okay, which is something that if we have lived most of our lives over here and we forgot probably what has happened in the past, is something that we don't experience that much. But during times of war, during times of famine, or when you don't have access, okay? When you don't have access to food, when, for example, you did not have much reserves in your pantry, and during this whole week when things were closed and you didn't have access, if you did not have food in your house, then you probably experienced some type of starvation. Starvation is forced upon you by outside forces, okay? So there is a big difference between fasting and starvation. Now we are 40 minutes into this lecture, and I think this is the last slide that I'm going to cover, and then I'm just going to give you a glimpse and sneak peek of the other slides that I have, and we're probably going to have to make this a part 2, okay? Fasting is merely, when we talk about fasting, what is fasting? Listen, we fast every single day. Imam Sahab has been saying that, we should fast, we should make it a regular part of our life. But guess what? We fast every single day, folks. Fasting is merely the absence of eating. Anytime you're not eating, you're technically fasting. Fasting is a part of our daily life. What do you call the meal you have in the morning? Breakfast. Break that word down. Breakfast. Break fast. Okay? The word refers to the meal that breaks your fast, which is done daily between dinner and breakfast. Let's assume that you have a good habit. It's not good to eat so late. If you haven't had dinner yet and you're watching me at 9:30, tisk, tisk, tisk. No. That is a big no. You should not be having food this late. You should not be having dinner this late and then laying down or sitting around and go to sleep, okay? So imagine you had dinner 7 o'clock, okay? I'll let you off. 7 o'clock, you had dinner. 6:30, you had dinner. And you're going to have breakfast, the next day at maybe 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. You just actually fasted for 12 hours, okay? So you probably drank water in between, but that's it. So the word breakfast implies itself that, fasting is not some type of cruel punishment that you put your body through. You do it every single day, okay? After dinner till breakfast, that is your fast, okay? Now, I'm going to stop it here, folks. And just to give you a glimpse of what we're going to talk about next week, we're going to talk about, why the concept of fasting in general, not Saum, fasting in general, is something that has been kept under the wraps and hush-hush by food companies. We're going to talk about what happens inside our body when we eat, okay? What is the reaction of our body? We're going to talk about glucose, the pancreas. We're going to talk about insulin, what happens when you eat, and what happens when you fast, okay? The way our body reacts. I'm going to also talk about some of the, what are the health benefits that our body gains from putting it through hunger. And then I am also going to talk about the different myths of fasting. Fasting burns muscle. Fasting causes low blood sugar. Fasting results in overeating. That is the case for a lot of people, but it doesn't have to be, okay? Just because you fasted all day in the month of Ramadan does not mean you have to pounce on iftar. And oh my God, let me just put it out there. And this is something that I'm going to talk about again and again. Breaking your roza and fasting with a samosa, oh my God, it's the biggest disservice that you can do to your body, physically, spiritually, and in every aspect. I mean, a samosa will suck the spirit out of your. I'm sorry you have to hear this. I know samosas are a big part of our iftar experience, but one of the cases that I'm going to make for those of you who are watching is that we have to change the way we break our fast. Okay, we have the whole year. We have all these other times to enjoy all of these nice fried fatty foods, but in Ramadan we make it something that's an exception, okay? Make fried foods and all of these comfort foods a treat or something just to do maybe once a week or on the weekend, but definitely don't make a habit of it. So, again, I will conclude here. We are going to definitely go into part 2. And for those of you who tuned in later, this is part 1 of a series of lectures that I'm going to be talking about in the month of Ramadan. Today, I talked about the physician within. We're going to talk about the tazkiyah within, the tarbiyah within, the history of fasting. You see all of these slides right here. All of these things are different, are themes of different topics that I'm going to be presenting, that I'm currently working on, and I'm going to be presenting to you as a platform for us to be emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, and financially ready for the month of Ramadan. Yes, financially as well, because one of the lectures is Zakat Matters. Ramadan is when a lot of people do their zakat calculation. So we are also going to talk about that as well. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for joining us. If you have benefited from this lecture, please drop in a dua for me. And if you think someone else will benefit from this, definitely consider sharing this with friends and family. Again, this is your brother, Abdurrahman Bashir, signing out. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.